Good afternoon, student. Today the lecture on Poetry 2, Dejection and Ode. Dejection and Ode written by Samuel Taylor Coleridge. About the author introduction, Samuel Taylor Coleridge was born on 21 October 1772 and he was died on 25 July 1834. He was an English poet, literary critic, philosopher, and theologian who, with his first William Wordsworth, was a founder of a romantic movement in England and a member of the Lake Poets. He also shared volumes and collaborated with Charles Lamb, Robert Southey, and Charles Lyot. He wrote the poems The Rime of the Ancient Mariner and Kubla Khan, as well as the major prose work Biographia Literaria. Critic work, especially on William Shakespeare, was highly influential and he helped introduce German idealist philosophy to English speaking culture. Coleridge coined many familiar words and phrases, including suspensions of disbelief. He had a major influence on Ralph Waldo Emerson and American Transcendentalism. Dejection and Ode is a poem written by Samuel Taylor Coleridge in 1802. The poem in its original form was written by Sarah Hutchinson, a woman who was not his wife, and discusses his feelings of love for her. The various versions of the poem describe Coleridge's inability to write poetry and living in the state paralysis, but published editions remove his personal feelings and mention of Hutchinson. Dejection and Ode, composed in 139 lines in 8 sections. The poem verses in iambic. Lines 1 to 4 are put together with a rhyme scheme of AB, BA, while lines 13 to 16 feature an AB, AB rhyme scheme before the poem settles back into rhymed couplets. Again, this is just one of the poem's 8 stanzas. The meaning of the ode: a word, a lyrical poem, typically one in the form of an address to a particular subject written in varied, irregular meter. A classical poem of a kind original meant the to be sung. The ode is a type of lyrical stanza. There are 3 typical forms of odes: the Pindaric, Horatian, and irregular. Pindaric odes follow the form and style of Pindar. Horatian odes follow convention of Horace. An English ode is a lyrical stanza in praise of or dedicated to someone or something that captures the poet's interest or serves as an inspiration for the ode. The lyric can be on various themes. The earliest odes in the English language using the word its strict form were the epithalamium and prothalomium of Edmund Spenser. For example, around 1800, William Wordsworth, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, John Keats, and Shelley wrote odes with irregular stanzas patterns. The greatest odes of the 19th century, however, were Keats' 5 great odes in 1819. Dejection means a sad and depressed state, low spirit. Introduction to Dejection Ode. Dejection and Ode is a poem written by Samuel Taylor Coleridge, we know that 1802. The poem in its original form was written to Sarah Hutchinson, a woman who was not his wife, and discusses his feelings of love for her. Coleridge felt trapped in loveless marriage. The various versions of the poem describe Coleridge's inability to write poetry and living in a state of paralysis, but published editions remove his personal feelings. And a mention of Hutchinson. Coleridge wants to his audience, the woman he loves, to know that his feelings are solemn, and that the depth of his agony in not being able to be in the relationship matches the scope of epic odes. The dejection and ode, the author compared himself to Patrick Spencer. Sir Patrick Spence is a legendary character who is described in the ballads of Sir Patrick Spence. He was a famous sailor and he was known for his adventures in the sea. The King of Scotland sent Sir Patrick on a mission, for he was considered to the best sailor. The soil, however, went wrong as the sea was rough. Though Sir Patrick was apprehensive, he dutifully obeyed the king's order and died during the expeditions. Sir Patrick Spence had to undertake a journey in the rough sea. He was told to do so by his king, though he knew that it would be dangerous. He undertook. The speaker in S.T. Coleridge Dejection and Ode experiences a mood of dejection. He believes that nothing good holds for him in the near future. Just like how Sir Patrick Spence had the knowledge of how bad weather could predict a full turn of events. The speaker says that he is expecting bad weather to come his way. Apt as the title, Dejection and Ode. S.T. Coleridge Dejection and Ode does not appear to be an apt title for the poem. The speaker addresses the lady, although she is not present, since it is an ode and ode to dejection. Although she is not present, since it is an ode to dejection, it could be the case that he is speaking to his own dejection, speaking for himself, like that. The abstract quality of dejection, but since he is striving for inspiration, he could be addressing creativity, and therefore the title purposefully misleading. Considering the idea of marriage between the mental, that means the inner, and nature external, the speaker is most likely addressing his inability to connect with the world. He spreaded for that, addressing his connecting the world, and then he separated or eject from nature. This is more logical because the void is in him and not in nature. Nature cannot be dejected, so it is not nature's lack of inspirational fodder. It is speaker's mental state and his inability to connect. The Dejection and Ode poem composed 139 lines in 8 sections. That means 8 part. So now let me see on section wise. Now the line wise explanation 1 to 8. Now let us see the poem lines 1 to 8. Well, if the bird was weather-wise who made The grand old ballad of Sir Patrick Spence, "This night so tranquil now will not go hence, unroused by whence that play vitiate trade, then those which mold you good in lazy flakes, or the dull sobbing draught that moans and rags upon the strings of this Aeolian lute, which better for were mute." For the explanation, it turns out that this poem epigraph was no accident. Our speaker starts off thinking about poor Sir Patrick, especially his talking about the original poet of the ballad of Sir Patrick Spence. In the nutshell, he says that if the original poet, the bard, knew how bad weather would predict a full turn of events weather-wise, then surely bad weather coming has the speaker's way. Although the night calm right now, tranquil, just pushing some clouds lazily around and making a dull sobbing sound. It must be that some rough winds and going to blow soon. And then the Aeolian lute here is a metaphor for the sounds and wine makes. Still, some folks have made actual Aeolian lute stringed instrument that play when the wind blows through them. The upset here is that the wind is not blowing. It should for our speaker taste. He was not rough weather, remember, because that would mean the bad things are coming like they were in the ballad of Sir Patrick Spence. That's a long way to go to tell us that our speaker to pretty dark mood. Let's see if he cheers up. From the next 9 to 60 lines, follow the new moon wind is bright and overspread with phantom light. With the swimming phantom light overspread, but rimmed and circled by a silver thread. I see the old moon in her lap, foretelling the coming on of rain and squally blast. And even now the gusts were swelling, and the slant night shower driving loud and fast. For the explanation, our speaker sees a new moon just like one in the ballad of Sir Patrick Spence. Again, this means the moon is actually totally black, but there often a thin white ring around like this. This ring is metaphorically compared to a silver thread. In the ballad of Sir Patrick Spence, this was an sick that bad weather would be coming to drown poor Sir Patrick. Our speaker seems to think us in for a similar fate. He is imagining that the same stormy weather is headed his way and even seems to hope for its arrival. Cherry guy, right? The next lines 70 to 20. Those sounds which often have raised me vessels they avoid, and sent my soul abroad, might now perhaps their wonted impulse give, might startle this dull pain and make it move and live and lie. The explanation. Number 1. Mr. Speakers, why are you so into the storm? Why do you want a bunch of wind and rain to fall on your head instead of a nice peaceful ride? Number 2. We get his answer here. He wants the rough weather because he hopes that it might inspire him and shake him up a bit. In the past storms like the one has hoping for have a word and send my soul and abroad. The 17 to 18 lines, and he is hoping for a similar effect, haunted impulse. The next one. What he has instead some dull pain, and it looks like he's trying to shake himself out of this funk. In short, dude has depressed weak guesses that dejection and ode is not just a clever title. For more on the title, check out What's Up with the Title, and for more and the way of the poem put together, form and meter. In the meantime, we'll see just what's got this guy so pumped out. The next one is section 2, the poem's lines 21 to 24. A grave without a bank, void, dark, and drearer, the stifled, drowsy, unimpassioned grief, which finds no natural outlet, no relief in word cincture. For the explanation, our speaker picks up the stanzas where he left off, bummed out. He is not angry, he is not frustrated, he is just depressed. He notes that this drowsy, unipassionate feelings, you know that feelings where you just feel like you don't want to get out their bed in the morning. Well, our speaker's got it saddest. He can't get right for it. The next lines 25 to 29. Oh lady, in this wan and heartless mood, to other thoughts by yonder Thistlewood, all this long eve, so balmy and serene, have I been gazing on the western sky, and it's a peculiar tint of yellow-green. For these lines, we meet a new character, say hi to lady. Everyone, lady, this is everyone. So the lady does not get an actual name. We now says sees a C. But that's about all the detail we have for now. For that, luckily for us, we have research in our side. Thanks to the work of historical scholarship, now the original versions used Sarah instead for lady. That would be Coleridge. Loud interest is Sarah Hutchinson. If you are keeping track at home, check out the nutshell for the scoop on how Coleridge must have thought he was being too obvious, though, because changed Sarah first to William as in William Wordsworth before settled on the lady, and the lady again the nutshell clears up those folk are. Our speaker wants the lady to know that his feelings weak and out of spirits. His thoughts have been distracted nearby through still a songstress. He's been just sitting here and night staring at the yellow green sky. It sounds like the poem lines 30 to 38. And still I guess, and with how blank an eye, and those thin clouds above in flakes and spots, that gives away their motions to the stars. The stars that glide behind them or between, now sparkling, now bedimmed, but always see. You crescent moon, you fixed as if it grew. It is one cloudless, starless lake of blue. I see them all so excellently fair. I see not feel how beautiful they are. For the explanation, the speaker is still looking at the sky here. Point number 2, he sees some flaky looking clouds as well as some stars behind between them. He also sees the moon in the sky but hears its crescent, not the new moon he mentions in line 9. It must be that he was just imagining a new moon back, since he wanted that omen, the foretell a storm, just like that read in the ballads of Sir Patrick Spence. Here, though we're back to reality, the speaker sees the moon's clouds and stars up above that recognizes how the beautiful they all are. Sadly, he does not feel the beauty, though this dude of since seriously bummed out. And then section 3, the lines are 39 to 46. My genial spits foil and chart on what can this avail to lift the something weight from off my breast. It were a vain endeavor, though I should gaze forever on the green light that lingers in the west. I may not hope from outward forms to win the passion and the life whose fountains are within. The explanation, point number 1, the speaker still depressed, just in case you thought he might have magically cheered up between stanzas. He wonders for the next noted, the wonders might be out there to lift his usually cherry mood. Point number 3, what can take the metaphorical weight and depression of his chest? Point number 4, he then answers himself nothing. Point number 5, it seems like he can stare forever at the green sky, but the vein that nothing going to turn his frown upside down. Next one is finally he concludes the stanza with the notions and nothing external. The outward forms is going to help him. His problem lies in that same place from which his patience and life spring in the metaphorical fountains of himself. Next point. So we are guessing the cookie bucket. It is out of the questions for this guy. The section 4, 47 to 52 lines. 47 to 52 lines. O lady, we receive but what we crave, and in our life alone does nature lie. Ours is her wedding garment, ours her shroud. And would we out behold of higher worth than that inanimate, cold world allowed to the poor, loveless, ever anxious crowd? For the explanation, point number 1, Our speaker is laying down to some life philosophy here, but it is a bit tricky to follow. Let's tackle it bit by bit. In lines 47 and 48, the speaker wants to this lady person to know that our sense of the world around us, nature, is colored by our attitude toward we received but what we give. That makes sense, right? If you wake up the great mood, then the probably that puddle you step in on the way to school is no big deal. Maybe it is even the lucky free shoe wash. Next one is, but the same token, our attitude toward nature can make it a great seems awful like that. The line number 49. Still, would not it be great if we could find anything to celebrate in life? Would behold the higher worthy, maybe the 50 lines of the speaker sure wishes that this were the case. The lines for 51, instead the world is inanimate, cold, in the eyes of, well, basically everyone without their life. The line number 52, does prove loveless were anxious crowd. We guessing our speakers is a code carrying member of this group of people. The next line 53 to 58. From the soul itself must issue forth a light, a glory, a fair luminous cloud enveloping the earth. And the soul itself must there be sent the sweet and potent voice of its own birth, of all sweet sounds, their life and element. Explanations. Point number 1. It is not like this guy is a total debate downer, though he can imagine an alternative to the Sadwell has been described so far. It's up to the soul to create a happier the world. From then next notice it. It has the power, according to our speaker anyway, to send forth a glorious cloud of light that can be wrapped around the earth, the sound near. It also can send forth a sweet, strong, potent voices of its own making, along with all the beautiful sounds of creations. Next point, the soul is like a ultimate here. It is the power to play on it. The section 5, the lines 59 to 63. Oh, pure of heart, thou needest not ask for of me what the strong music in the soul may be, what and wherein it doth exist, the light, this glory, this fair luminous must, the beautiful and the beauty making power. For the explanations about the lines, first point, in this a new stanza, our speaker continues or addresses a lady. This time the figurative describes her as having a pure heart. He must think pretty highly of her then. Second point, he was done that he tells her that she does not have to ask him anything more about this awesome soul music has been describing, nor does she have to ask him about the beautiful light show that the soul is capable putting on. The next lines 64 to 72. Joy, virtuous lady, joy that never was given, save to the pure and in their purest heart, life and life effluence, cloud at once and shower. Joy, lady, is a spirit and the power which wedding nature to us gives in dower. A new earth and a new heaven undreamed of by the sensual and the proud. Joy is the sweet voice, joy the luminous cloud. We in ourselves rejoice. Explanations for the first point. Now a speaker calls a lady virtuous. It sounds like somebody got a crush. Point number 2. He goes on to let her know the reasons behind all the pretty music and light that the soul can release into the world joy. Point number 3. For that, it is not just kind of a joy you get when you get an in calculus though. This kind of joy is a purest kind felt by pure people living their purest lives, experiencing the purest moments, wherever talking 100% undiluted joy here. Point number 4. The speaker describes this kind of pure life and the things that flow out of it. The metaphor of a cloud and the rain, things that flow of life. Point number 4. This kind of joy allows you to see world nature and rewarding way that brings us closer of the world, and when that happens we get the metaphorical wedding gift, dowry like that. It is a new set of street knives. It is even the better than that when we experience this kind of pure joy wherever that treated to a new sense of birth, both of earth and heaven. The view of point, the view way the better than sensual, proud, personal might of heaven. For that, next point, joy is what brings up the lightest and the music allowing to the appreciate ourselves and find joys in just being us. Next point, to put it simply, joy is pretty great. If you did not know, that must be why our speaker capitalizes in the stanza. Next poem lines 73 to 75. And Athens flows all that charms or ear or sight, all melodious choice of that voice, all colors of suffusions from that light. For the explanation, in the fact everything that charms our hearing or our visions flows from this sense of joy. We owe every melody we hear and color we see it is amazing powers. Thanks Joyce, you are pretty awesomes. Next one, section 6. The poem lines are 76 to 81. There was a time when, though my path was rough, this joy within me detailed with distress, and all misfortunes were put at the stuff, whence the fancy made me dreams of happiness, of hope grew round me like the twinning vine, and fruits and folly, age not my own, seemed mine. For the explanation, point number 1. This is new stanza of a speaker looking back of his life. Point number two, once upon a time he had some of that same joy that he raves about in stanza 5. Point number three, even when life got a bit rough, he was able to rely on the joy to fight off detailed his bad feelings and distress. Point number four, any misfortune that happened to him, lost wallet, stubbing, toy, etc., just seemed to be immaterial like this stuff and dreams. Point number four, the same time the personified fancy made him happy dream from the same stuff. Point number five, notice the use of capitalization again here. Fancy, it is a bit like the speaker's imagination, and in this case of capable, sustaining his good feelings even when the chips are down by delivering good dreams to him. Using a smile, the speaker lets to know the hope of grow all around like him like a twisting. The next lines 82 to 86. But now afflictions bow me down to earth, nor care I that they rob me my mirth. But oh, each visitation suspends what nature gave me at my birth, my shaping spirit of imagination. For the explanation, point number one, the bad news is not far behind. The speaker continues with the plant imagery, describing now how his afflictions make him to droop like some kind of wilting flower. You know what? He's so sad that he does not ever even care anymore. That's a pretty high level depression when you think about that. Um, if you don't even the care anymore, that you are sad, think and rough indeed. Every time he gets one of these bad feelings, the speaker feels robbed, suspends his natural gift of imagination. At the point of it is worth considering the just who a speaker is. We say turns more about this over the speaker section, but for now we'll just point out that the key drawback to our speaker being a bummed out is the way affects his innate the creativity. The use of the capital letter reminds that just how important his imagination is to the speaker and how much the drag not to have it. The next lines 87 to 93. For not to think of what I need must feel, but to be still and patient all in I can, and happily by abstruse research to steal from my own nature all the natural man. This way my soul reserves my only plan till that which suits a part of in fact the whole and now almost ground habit of my soul. For the explanation, in order to cope with losing his imagination to his depression, the speaker has to go to some pretty far extremes. His being by describing how difficult it is not a dual fact he's lost his truly feelings. He was mentioned the lines of 87, what I needs must feel. He has to just wait and be patient, hoping to capture some sense of his former sense, which was once so touched in his imagination. If he is able to do that now, though it is not after the intense of difficult reflections, research by strict luck, of his, he can the rescue some portions of his former self, 89 to 19 lines. This is all just a figurative ways of saying that he is constantly trying to recapture some part of his former happy and imaginative self in the hopes of he can restore his entire self. In fact, the whole escape the depressions. It is sounds of exhausting to us, but for our speakers, it is his only plan. He does this so often. This particularly a habit reflections for him the bad times. The next one is section 7. The lines are 97 to 107. 94 to 107. Hence viper thoughts that coil around my mind. Reality dark dream. I turn from you and listen to the wind which long has raved unnoticed what a scream of agony by torture lengthened out the lutes of sent forth. The wind that traversed without a bare crag of mountain, tiny blasted street of pine grove with their woodman never clump, lonely house long held the witcher's home. Methinks were fitter the instrument for the mad lutanist who, in this the month of showers, dark brown of garlands and a peeping flowers, mocks devil's yule with worse than wintry song, the blossoms, buds, and timorous lives among. For the explanation, things only seems to get the worse for the speakers in this stanza. His thoughts are metaphorically poisonous snakes, reality in the just a figurative, bad dream to come, not fun. The speaker turns away from you. Remember that he is speaking to lady. Still, only the realizes that the wind has been howling all this time. The metaphorical Aeolian lute from the line 7 sounds like the prolonged screaming of a torture victim. Now, before we can continue on with the general horribleness, will note here that it is not clear yet the weather has actually gotten the worse. Remember that the night started out of tranquil enough. If this just speaker's imaginations, let's keep an eye out for clues. The speaker then turns to addresses the personified wind directly, saying that he can think of a new, more appropriate instruments for his play than it is still a metaphorical lute. How about the instance of bare mountain top, crack mountain dead tree, abandoned the pine grove, suspected the hunt and house would be fitting in this wind. The imagery here that emphasizes the weather's connections to the lonely, decaying state of the speaker's imagination. The speaker then doubles down on his metaphors to describe the wind as a crazed lute player. Playing in this month of storms and decaying the vegetations, even the flowers just barely peeping and poking through. This mad lute player of apparently celebrating to a kind of demonic Christmas, scaring everything sight. Even the leaves are nervous. The next poem lines are 108 117. Though actor perfect in all tragic sounds, though might poet even the frenzy bold, What tellest thou now about? 'Tis of the rushing of an host in rout, with groans of trampled man with the smarting wounds. At once they groan with the pain and shudder. With the cold of hush, there's a purse deeper silence, and all those noise, all those rushing crowd, with groans of tremulous, shuddering all is over. It tells another tale with the sounds less deep and aloud. For the explanation, the wind is now been no longer the musician, it is an actor. The wind sure has some creative chops. Unfortunately, the wind's actor is perfect at playing tragedies. Next point, it also put again one that kicks up the wild frenzy. What's the poet designing on more, especially on just the heartwarming short story of a feelings defeated army, filled with the groans of wounded beaten men. You were expecting the maybe roses are red. Just like that, though, this terrible noises over the another tale starts up. It is maybe the nice happy ending. Here it is a wherever the not holding out hope. Next lines 18 to 25, 118 and 125. A tale of less affright that tempered with delight, as Otway's self had framed the tender lay. 'Tis of a titled child upon the someone wild, not far from home, but she hath lost her way, and now mourns low is bitter grief and fear, and now screams loud and hopes to make her fear here. For the explanations, this new tale, it turns out it is a less frightening, more cheery. Here the maybe will we will get the happy ending after all. The speaker says that the story of it is a Outway himself wrote it. The history noted Otway is not what epic Latin. This refers to Thomas Otway, a 17th century English poet and playwright who is particularly known the tragedies. The story about the little child, so far so good, who gets lost to the wilderness not so happy, even though this is not far from home, have maybe will work out. She is screaming and mourning for her mother. To recap, then the wine has gone from playing the lute of devil's yule to being an acted tragedy to being a poet who sings of cherished little yarn about a lost girl in the woods screaming for her mother. This wind and short, howling, terrifying forces like that. The last section 8, the lines are 126 to 131. Does midnight but small thoughts have a off asleep full seldom may my friend such a vigil skip visits her gentle sleep with wings of healing, and may the storm be but a mountain birth. May all the stars hang bright above her dwelling. Silence, although they watched that sleeping earth. For the explanation, our speaker stops to talking about that horrible wind and now focuses back on himself. Even though the midnight he cannot get off to sleep, He really hopes that his friend, the lady from before, does not have to go through anything like this. If she does, he hopes that this only happens to seldom. It would be better that she were sleeping. In fact, the speaker calls upon a personified person asleep. Notice the capital S to heal his lady friend. He also wishes for the storm that he is being describing to be typically short of a violent mountain storm, mountain birth. He is then goes on that wish for bright stars to have hang above the home of his friend, looking down on the personified sleeping earth. For the last lines 132 to 139. With a light heart may she rise, gay fancy cheerful eyes, joy lift her spirit, joy attune her voice, to her may all things live. From pole to pole their life, the edding for her living soul. O simple spirit guided from above, dear lady, friend, devotes of my choice, thus mayest thou evermore rejoice. For the explanation, our speaker's not done with his wish list yet though. He wishes for his friend to wake up with a figuratively light heart and a happy spirit of that, and a heaping helping of the joy, and he has been talking about. He wants the world to seem alive to her, unlikely his own perceptions of dead leaves her haunted house. To stir her spirit, he calls his lady friend simple spirit and says she's divinely guided above. This is not just any friend, though. He lets to lady know this is his number one seats when it comes to friendship, and hopes that she will always be happy and rejoice. So even though he is totally down in the dumps and depressed, he still wishes her happiness and joy. What a guy. The theme of the poem. The poem expresses feelings of dejection and the inability to write poetry or to enjoy nature. Coleridge cannot find anything positive in his problems, and he expresses how he feels paralyzed by his emotions. The source of his paralysis was his feelings for Hutchinson and problems dealing with his marriage. Thank you.